Hey everyone, I'm super excited today to have with us a really special guest. In the short time that I've got to know him, he's ready to become a very close dear friend. He is a man that needs no introduction, but forget about needs no introduction. He's someone that wears his heart on his sleeve. Zohar is someone that had founded a phenomenal company called Pecan.ai. Pecan.ai to date has already raised 50 million, has 50 plus people working for there. But the story today is not going to be all about, the phenomenal company Pecan. The story today is going to be about Zohar. Zohar, when the first time I met him, told me this quote that I thought was absolutely brilliant, which is, he said, "A good day is a day when I'm closer to accomplishing my goals." And today we're going to learn all about Zohar, how he goes about accomplishing his goals, the lessons that he learned in building his incredible startup, and how we're going to take that and apply it to our own life. But not only that, Zohar is a father, an incredible father to two beautiful girls, and an incredible husband, and I think he is, we'll ask his wife afterwards, to a beautiful wife too. So Zohar, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. You already made me blush.
Well, that was the goal. If our goal is to make you blush, we could shut this off. We did accomplish our goal, and see you next time.
Exactly.
But Zohar, I mean, first of all, your story is phenomenal. Someone that comes with, you have no introduction to startups. You spent 10 years in university. You got two, PhDs, one in computational neuroscience and one in philosophy. And, you served an incredible intelligence unit, but no introduction to startups, no thing for entrepreneurship. So let's take a step back, but before we take a step back into, where you're from, what your upbringing was like, and then how that introduced you into entrepreneurship, I want to start off with, what are you grateful for today?
Wow, the list is so long, Ephraim. I'm afraid it will take all hour. I am the kind of person who is grateful from the get-go for so many things. I think, I always say it. Building a company is a challenging thing. You have to do a lot of hard things. You have to be quick. You have to be adaptive. You have to be enduring, smart. All of those things for sure. One another thing, at least from my experience, you have to have is quite a lot of luck in many situations out there. And I'm the kind of person that understands that we had a lot of luck and we will need a lot of luck, and that's part of the game, and that's okay.
Right. There's a famous quote. I think I even heard this from you. You told it to me last time we spoke, but there's a famous story about this rich man. They say it about Rothschild that goes to, they once asked him, I think it was Rothschild, they once asked him on, what do you attribute your success to? So he's like, it's 90% luck and 10% seichel, which is using my mind. And he's like, if I'm able to change the 10% for 100% luck, I would do it any day.
So Absolutely. And I think it helps.
So let's take
it helps understanding.
For sure.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
So it's all attributed to luck. So let's take a step back now. I want you to tell us about, where you're from and, what your upbringing was like.
So, like you said, I have a very thin history basically before Pecan, because growing up in Haifa, going to school, and then immediately, as everyone in Israel, we are being sent to the army. I went to one of the largest intelligence units here in Israel, 8200, which is the farmhouse of so many great entrepreneurs and companies and technologies and so on and so forth. And then after the army, we all have this routine here in Israel where we go to the some kind of a post-army trip. Some of us go to India, some of us go to South America, some of us go to Australia. I was in South America for more than half a year. It's kind of a transition and maturity from army to adult life. It's a very nice tradition that we have here in Israel. And then I started my university career. I basically did my bachelor's, master's, another master's, a PhD, another PhD. I came to the university and quite forgot to leave, but it was an amazing experience. so incredible in so many ways. And this is also where I meet my co-founder, Noam, who is our CTO today. We meet back in the day when we just started our masters, and we basically did the masters and the PhD shoulder to shoulder throughout the 6 years. So we had quite a lot of experience working together and bringing forward ideas, then proving them or disproving them usually, and moving forward like this. We finished with the PhDs and basically started Pecan back to back, and it's been a crazy ride since then, for sure.
Wow. So I think, what happened in university, there was no more degrees to accomplish that you had to leave automatically?
Jokes aside, it was a hard dilemma because, growing as an adult in research, you come to really appreciate knowledge, really appreciate deep dives into a very narrow subject matter. And, moving to the industry always has trade-offs, like everything in life. Moving to the industry means that you get to do much more, but you never get to do anything as deep as you can do that in university or in a formal research framework. I'm anything but sorry that I did the decision, that I made this decision, but it wasn't an easy one. And everyone has to make their own kind of, set of consideration. It's possible though. If there's one thing that I can say, and not only based on my experience, but based on many of my colleagues and friends, you can definitely transit or shift from academy into the industry and enjoy a fruitful career.
Right. It's funny you mentioned that, because I actually had that conversation recently with quite a few people. The hardship of the transition from an academic career, right, whatever it is, to switching into the actual industry. And actually saw quite a few startups creating that quote-unquote boot camp for people that are looking to transition from there. So it's a very interesting mindset. But back to your career, I'm assuming, once you graduated with all the masters and everything, you probably had the dilemma, like, do I go ahead and become a professor, right, and stay in academic career? You probably had that in your mind, thinking that could be a professor at any university that you wanted to go participate in. Or do I go ahead and eventually launch a startup, which was your first job, and we'll get into that in a second. But what was that framework of mind back then to decide which path to go?
Definitely set on the path of an academic career. I saw myself as a postdoctoral and then a professor doing research for the rest of my life, and I was very excited about it. But then two things happened. One, like I said, Noam, which is a very close friend and a colleague and a partner and my work husband and you name it, basically really had the urge, really had the need to do something applicable, something that touches on many lives. And I really wanted to work with Noam. So it was for me, it was following his urge and need, and on the one end. And then on the other hand, we realized the opportunity on which Pecan lies. Right. So our background, our field, our research was around statistics and AI and models and so on and so forth. And we constantly kept asking ourselves, why aren't everyone doing it? It's so amazing.
Right.
It's so powerful. It can move so many needles in so many places. How is it that just a handful of people and a handful of organizations are, harnessing this amazing kind of capability? And when we realized what we think are the barriers, we felt that it's going to be a sin not to try and fix it. And the combination of the urge to do something applicable, led by Noam, and the urge to make this difference in the world drove both of us to kind of switch paths.
Wow, amazing, absolutely amazing. Seeing so it's like almost the excitement that you had, and you trying to use applicable AI to solve complex issues. The excitement you had, you wanted to bring that excitement to other people. And you went through that feeling. Obviously, you wanted to work together with Noam, who you is your study partner and everything else. So working together with someone that's awesome and finding a partner that you're able to connect with is also incredible. But the excitement that you had, you walking down the street thinking, why isn't that person excited about applicable AI just like I am? So let me go ahead and bring that solution. So incredible. So you go ahead, you and Noam, you decide you want to work with Noam, you make this very hard decision to leave the academic path. And I'm not worried because I know eventually after you sell Pecan, you'll probably end up back in the academic path as a professor somewhere. But you go ahead and you make this hard decision. Tell me about the founding days of once you committed to start Pecan, you and Noam. Like, what was the process like first? And then same time, how did you get that first investor check? You had no entrepreneurship background. You were someone that was focused solely on studies. Had no idea. You probably didn't even know what a term sheet meant. How'd you go? So talking about the first founding days and that first check.
Yeah, with pleasure. So I think we spoke about luck earlier. I think this is definitely a case where Mr. Luck appeared. We had two different threads that took place when we started. The first one is the more, let's call it standard one, where we started researching the market, the companies, spoke with colleagues. We didn't have a lot of entrepreneurial background, but we did have a lot of friends, a lot of people who worked in different companies, and we tried to validate and see if what we assumed about the barriers to entry into the world of AI, which is what Pecan basically does, lowering these barriers, are they indeed the barriers we had in mind? So that is the classic ideation case where you start with an idea and you want to kind of validate it and so on and so forth. And then in parallel, we generated some of the relationship with people, and we started talking about the idea, the kind of platform that we want to build, our expertise from the academic world. And some good people heard the idea and said, this sounds really interesting and relevant, and just introduced us spontaneously, without us even understanding, to a few leading VCs here in Israel. And then we went and met those VCs. Now, there are two things I think that happened. First of all, obviously, I believe that what we think made sense. It's a non-starter if you don't believe in what you're thinking, right, or if other people don't relate to it. But then I think it was also a combination of what we believed can be achieved with this kind of technology, so that we were not only focused on the technological capability, but how the world can be affected by it as a perspective.
Sure.
And I think that also our personal background, coming from such a, let's call it, hyper-growth academic career, probably also tells you something about the personality of the people and their ability to work together, shoulder to shoulder, putting ego aside. These are the kind of things that early stage VCs are looking for, right? Like indications, right, of how the founders can work together. And then, speaking of luck, we had a great fortune of meeting our seed investor, Chaim Sadger, which just founded S Capital, along with Aya Peter Berg. Chaim was the founding and managing partner of Sequoia Israel prior to that, and then started S Capital. And when we met him, it was the end of our round investment. We already had term sheets, we already had offers. We were very close to closing a seed deal. but then we met Chaim. And I have to say, I don't know if it was love at first sight from his side. I think it was. I know it was from our side. We fell in love. We really resonated with how he interprets, so to speak, the business world. We felt that there's so much for us to learn from him and from Aya. And still with those term sheets in hand, he told us, guys, I'm going to invest in you, and I'm going to invest in you in a serious way. And this is how it started. If we hadn't taken this meeting, for example, which was already, like I say, when we already had offers, you don't necessarily take meetings at this stage, then we for sure had been on a different path. So that's just a small example of how taking meetings sometimes can, yield unexpected and great outcomes.
Wow. They say someone that's working, a worker man, for example, or someone that's in the business, is able to see coincidence and divine providence in a way that no one else is able to see. You bump into him, introduce you to him, all of a sudden you have a check, It's like this whole entire workaround, how things work, is the most incredible thing. And, two questions I have, like the first question obviously is, when you were going around raising money to investors, and, did you have an actual product then, was a design flow? Did you even have an MVP? What did you have going for you then?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the quick answer is we didn't have a product, but we did have a solid technological proof of concept, which is, I think, in our case, was more important. We identified the one or two major barriers to entry to the world of predictive analytics and AI. And we said those barriers, data-related barriers, are barriers that we are able to build a solution for, to make it automated and make it far more easy to apply. And then we were able to show with our technology how this can work for a couple of use cases and a couple of data sources. With that in hand, if you follow our logic and if you accept some of our assumptions about the market and the opportunity and how you build a product on top of that, it's the kind of comfort that, in retrospect, I think the VCs were looking for.
Right. Awesome. Wow. So, and your first check was how much money?
The first check was $4 million.
$4 million.
Back in 2018. Now, just to give you a perspective,
so tell me.
Brian, when you are doing a PhD, when you're doing a PhD in the university here in Israel, your scholarship is something like $2,000 a month.
Okay.
So you're not used to think or to digest in any way, psychologically or physically, this kind of money. So it was a very surreal experience getting this amazing, vote of confidence or leap of faith by Chaim and Aya. And the nice thing here is that we've signed the term sheet with them on Noam's birthday, and we got the money to the bank on mine.
Wow.
Speaking of coincidence.
Wow. That is real coincidence. Wow.
Indeed.
But I think the big thing is like, you're coming from university, like you mentioned, $2,000 a month was your stipend, or whatever you're making there to pay. And all of a sudden you had this check. Someone gave you $4 million. That's a lot of money, right? And you're holding that check and you're thinking to yourself, I mean, I can't even imagine what the emotions you were feeling or going through. That's crazy. Wow. Crazy. Yeah. So you get this $4 million check. You're obviously a rich man, so you decided you wanted to jet off to somewhere else, to go to the Caribbean islands, to go vacation and spend the money. But on the other note, so what do you do then? You get this $4 million, you have the check now, and you start building. So, and you're a first-time entrepreneur. So tell me about some of the early challenges and mistakes you made, And then we'll go into some of the successes you had as a first-time founder also, and your whole learning process.
Yeah, definitely. So it's an easy topic talking about my mistakes, because wherever you'll put your finger, you'll get some. And I can tell you how we went about it. So I knew that I didn't have any experience. It has advantages not having experience, because a lot of times first of all, you feel comfortable being the least smart person in the room, and I always feel comfortable being that person. And then you also feel comfortable asking the kind of weird questions that kind of probe the assumptions. But obviously, the disadvantages of being inexperienced is that there are so many things you need to learn that other people just learn by experience. So I think we went in an avenue that helped us here. So one thing we did was working with some advisors and consultants, and bringing people who've been there, done that, seen a couple of things, understand what you're trying to do. Obviously, we can't afford, as a very early stage company, putting everyone on the paycheck full time. That would obviously not be an option for the company, but we could take them part time and kind of learn from their experience and from how they think.
Right.
So we had this kind of motion in play. Then the other thing I did, I spent quite a lot of time reading blogs, reading kind of historical stories, success stories of companies, books, whatever that might be. And then you have to make mistakes. That would be my last addition to the tactics here. You can't be afraid or paralyzed by the anxiety to make mistakes. Mistakes are part of the story. Everyone are making mistakes. It's the only way that you can eventually get to something which is not a mistake or not a full mistake. And I made mistakes. You asked earlier about mistakes. I made mistakes in choosing the right timing for several things, like go-to-market, like other issues. I made mistakes in building the roadmap of the product initially. So the right thing would be always to validate the most crucial assumptions and then work backward. We had a feeling that some of the assumptions were bulletproof and we don't need to validate them. And, mistakes and inexperience, a mistake coming from inexperience. But the nice thing here, and this is also something that we have to acknowledge with regards to our seed investors, we were encouraged and we were supported, not only throughout our successful cases, but also when we made mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes, make them fast, understand you're on the wrong direction, pivot quickly, and so on and so forth. This combination of advisors, learning whatever you can from resources that are available, and there are many, and then obviously doing a lot of stuff to kind of learn from the field, helped us kind of gain experience, hopefully, to a degree.
Right, for sure. And, I think the last point, I think 2 points you mentioned, which are phenomenal. I think all the points you mentioned, but 2 of them really stand out, was, first of all, allowing yourself to make mistakes. And like you mentioned, a lot of times that anxiety builds up in us and paralyzes us from actually going ahead and making that mistake. Or even when you do make the mistake, to not blame yourself and beat yourself up for making the mistake, but allowing yourself to make the mistake. That's the biggest thing. Make the mistake, but allow yourself to do it. Don't make the mistake and start going, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. What am I going to do? And beat yourself up. How come I didn't do it perfectly? And all the anxiety and the fear and the paralyzation that comes into it and all that trauma. Make the mistake, and allow yourself to do it. Embrace it, appreciate it. Now that you made the mistake, don't be an idiot and make the mistake a second time. Learn from your thing, right? Like that process.
You said it.
And then he said, and I love the fact that you mentioned that obviously you had a great investors allowing you to make a mistake, but also the best way to make a mistake and the best way to learn is just do. Just do. Action. Like Nike symbol. Just do it. It's all about. It's making mistakes and do actions. The best way in order for you to learn. And to hear that from an academic like yourself also, I'm assuming you probably had that process also while you were learning in your studies. You probably had this learning process, what you did, and you probably had the process of also learning how to make mistakes. I think, wow.
100%.
Incredible. So you're doing all this process. You're speaking to advisors. You're making mistakes. You have their permission to make mistakes, and you're actually doing action. And so you go ahead and trying to build this whole entire process. So what was the process to acquiring your first customer? Because it's two pivotal moments a lot of times in a company. It's the day your investors invest in you, give you that T-check, and it's your first customer is actually paying you money. When you're like, what? They're actually paying me for this product. And now you know, like, you're really alive. So what was that? Who was the first customer, and what was the process to getting them?
Couldn't agree more. By the way, if you ask me if I can give any advice, and I do want to say every company, every entrepreneur, every founder has their own route, their own path. No one knows what's best for them. But if I can say anything about that, is that I think your point is spot on. The real moment of an entrepreneur's initial milestone would be the first customer who is objectively willing to pay serious money for the software or for the solution, in our case, whatever that might be. And in my case, we spoke about mistakes earlier, by the way. So I'll just say, in my case, in retrospect, I'm sorry it didn't happen earlier. I think one of the things that we did in Pecan that I would have done differently out of many was to go to market quicker, go to market sooner.
Okay.
But in any case, it was one of those advisors I told you about earlier that said, you know what, let me take you to one of my networks, one of my acquaintances. It seems like what you're doing can talk to them, can resonate with them. We met, we explained, we said, this is what it can do for you, this is how it works. It was obviously a super information condensed event because you got so much feedback. For the first time, people literally provide so much feedback, positive and negative, obviously. But eventually, we made a deal. It was quite a large one. So it was a 6-digit deal, which is quite large for being the first deal in a company. Wow. And soon enough, a few followed. So there's definitely an effect in our case, of when it rains, it pours, or the flood opens up. I think there's a lot of momentum in startups. It's not a case where you can be very slow on your wins. And it's a thing. It's like if you have one customer, you feel differently, you feel confident, sure. You speak differently to the next one, you can refer the next one to the first one. So I think nailing the right first customer at the right time, at the right price, is one of the most important things at your early seed stage.
Right. Wow. I mean, just the 6-digit deal as your first customer is absolutely amazing, incredible. And like you said, that vote of confidence. So then walk me through. I mean, now you obviously have, a very big vote of confidence. You've been invested in by incredible investors. You've raised, a very nice amount of money to date. Did your mother ask you for money yet? Did everyone does people think that money? Did your friends think that money went to your bank account, or But a very big vote of confidence you have, and you have a tremendous amount of users and customers. But there's one thing from our interaction so far. Like there's two things that I was able to pick up. The first thing is when you said that you hate you enjoy being the stupidest person in the room. From a guy like you that is absolutely brilliant, forget about the whole academic career, which, is, you obviously worked hard and smart enough to do that, but someone that's absolutely brilliant. And at the same time, the humility that you have is incredible. I mean, I don't know if it comes from your parents. I don't know if it comes from a life situation, but, talk to me. I mean, it's very obviously for you to talk about your humility is almost like saying that you're not humble, but talk to me about how important is it to have that humility, as a CEO running a company, and in general, from your own perspective and from a perspective of observing others from your learning experience.
So I'll definitely try to address it, maybe not from the personal perspective because it's harder, but maybe in a general way. I'll tell you two things if fine. One, there's a very solid logical argument, not any kind of a Zen argument. Very logical argument, very capitalistic argument to why you should be the most stupid person in the room. And in one word, it would be specialization. The reason we are so successful as a species, the reason we are so successful as a society, the reason we have such amazing technology and capabilities, it all comes down to one fact. Each of us gets specialized in a specific, very narrow domain, and then does it far better than any of their colleagues. So in that sense, there shouldn't be a single function at Pecan that I'm doing better than anyone else. On the contrary, any function at Pecan should have a specialized person that's their domain expertise and specificities where they can shine. And in that regard, when it comes to a discussion, be it a discussion about marketing or sales or success or product or R&D, I should be the one that understands the least. Hopefully, on some cases, I can ask intelligent questions, I can moderate the discussion, I can help weave into the discussion other considerations, but eventually the specialization dictates, basically, that we let those people who specialize in their domains excel. So that's one perspective which I absolutely endorse and super believe in. The second thing I want to say is that again, I'm not a Zen master. I'm not an egoless person, and I'm not considering myself to be any kind of a humble being. The only thing I am realizing, and again, from a purely logical, purely capitalistic point of view, ego is a silent killer of companies. If you want to get a good recipe for a company that will fail, pour in a lot of ego to the story. And this is why at Pecan we have a value, an explicit value, one of our 3 values, that basically states that you should be ego aware, not egoless.
Right.
Mind you, it's not that we expect people or ourselves to not think about ourselves, to not be driven in a way by our ego, like every healthy human being is. Ego is amazing. Ego drives us to be achievable and so on and so forth. But to be aware of the cases where ego takes the front seat and kind of bias your judgment. These are the cases where eventually it becomes like a cancer in the body of the company. And from a purely egoistic perspective, I don't want it. So I would say it's a very important component to our culture. And Noam and myself, we are working hard on, implicitly and explicitly embedding it into our day-to-day.
Right. Wow. It's two incredible things. I have so many questions, so I got to think of which way. But to touch upon one point, I think a lot of times to essentially remember about, we'll take ego perspective for a second. Essentially, nobody I think this goes back to even a deeper question of, for example, what does a meaningful life mean, and what is happiness, right? We became into a 21st century where happiness is a definition of consumerism, of trying to acquire the next big thing in order to satisfy myself, in order for my needs. But happiness, in a general term, is being involved, part of a community, contributing to something bigger than yourself. Living a meaningful life, not about consumerism, not about how much money you made or if you did something, but living part of something bigger, a part of a community, helping somebody, helping a neighbor, and things around that. Actually, living a life based upon morals, real strong morals, which it's not about the I, but it's about the we. It makes you, when you live something like it, think about it, it makes you a lot of times realize that you're not any better than the other person. So if someone has more money, did something bigger, they worked harder, had a bigger, luck, blessing, whatever you want to consider it. But it doesn't make someone else better than the next person. And it's sort of like the way how you're instilling your culture in the company, that, listen, we're all in here together. We're all here together. We're all here to build something, to take Pecan and to make it bigger than ourselves, to contribute more to society in a way that, we believe we can make an impact, and we believe it can be better. It is incredible to see. So we talk about culture. I mean, obviously everyone knows company culture is the most important thing, but someone that has no experience building a culture, how did you go about building a culture, and how do you make sure, and what's your and now you have 4 years of experience, but how do you make sure to instill that culture, especially a place of no ego? Because at the end of the day, human beings are very fragile, and everyone has their ego, and making sure that everyone feels appreciated. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And again, we come back to the point where I embrace some of my earlier mistakes. At the beginning, Noam and I, we had, I'd say, an implicit culture at the company. So we had this tacit understanding between the two of us,
right,
that, for example, ego is, can get out of control and can cause a lot of damage, and we don't want it, we don't believe in it, and we believe in a lot of mutual respect. That's what got us through everything we went through together. So we had this implicitly between us, and this is something very nice about the company. Like I said, founders eventually are not the subject matter expertise, but founders shape the culture, even if they're not saying anything explicitly. They shape they shape the culture of the company by the mere behavior and actions that they are taking and making, and the way they discuss with one another and with the other employees, and so on and so forth. So I'd say at the first a year or two at Pecan, the culture was implicit. And then roughly a year ago, when other people came, people that obviously had experience in respective domains and other companies, we decided to make this implicit culture an explicit one. Again, in retrospect, I would have done that far earlier. It really helps putting these things on the table in a very explicit manner, but it took us a little bit of time getting there.
Sure. Right. Wow. I mean, Zohar, everything you're mentioning out of you, is coming out of you, is first of all, can be written into a credible book. It's almost like a blueprint, how to build a startup and how not to make mistakes, and what mistakes not to make. It's incredible. I'm blown away and amazed. Like, I know I could sit and talk with you for hours about this, but I want to touch upon another subject. When you started your company 4 years ago, is it 5 or 4 years?
3 years ago.
3 years ago. 3 years ago, you were married. You already had a child, right? So you go to so talk to me about that. Tell me about that conversation you had with your wife, and then I'm assuming it wasn't an easy one. Like, hey, honey, I have this crazy idea. I'm not sure how I'm going to pay our rent now, but thank God you're able to do that from a $4 million check. But I had this idea to build a startup. I might be away for probably 18 hours a day. You mind taking care of the kid? What was that conversation like with your wife deciding to build that startup? And how, I guess, talk to me about the positive impact of having a having a spouse during the difficult times of building a startup, and the negativity of how it could also impact, over there.
Yeah. No, this is an amazing question, I find. And by the way, an under-discussed topic. Now that you asked it, I realize people don't talk about it enough. Happy to share my 2 cents. So first of all, as an introduction, and she's not here to hear me, so I'm not saying it for her. I have an amazing wife.
We'll make sure. We'll make sure she doesn't hear this.
Yeah, please do. I really won the lottery here, and she was and is supportive to a degree beyond recognition. It's amazing, and we spoke about luck. Here again, you see these places where you never know what will be, and you get the whole 9 yards of luck. So for me, it was an amazing experience. She is with me since my academic career. She was part of the decision to make the transition. She was very supportive. We made another baby already when I had Pecan, and obviously it's a lot of work having 2 babies. She's super helpful. But then I have another thing, and this is something which, again, another mistake I made, but here I was able to correct it quickly. There is zero reason, not 0.001, round zero reason to neglect your family for the business. There's nothing that can justify it from the business perspective. Everyone has their threshold. Someone needs to be 3 hours with their family. A day on average, someone needs to be 2 hours, someone needs half an hour. It doesn't matter. That's personal, and that's fine. But whatever your number is, make sure you do it. And make sure you don't neglect it, because nothing can justify losing time with your family, because you can always work. If you had 27 hours a day, you can work 27 hours a day, but it's not smart. It will never get you the end result. You need to be smart, and you need to make sure that if there's one test I'm always asking myself, if I were to, God forbid, die tomorrow morning, will I feel like I was there for my family and enjoyed enough with my family, or not? And I'm not the kind of person who will buy the argument, I'll do it after the exit, I'll do it after at the IPO, I'll do it after. No, it doesn't work like this. It's not justified. And I think that if you resonate with that, then everything falls in place. And again, have luck with an amazing wife like I had, and everything will be
fine. Wow, that's so powerful, because a lot of times, the reason, like, you ever think about the excuses that people try to combat that with, like saying, I do everything for the family. I'm trying to, I'm working so hard in order for my family to live X amount of lifestyle, or I'm working so hard in order to do this. If you're doing that, you're missing the whole entire point of what you just said. You're missing the whole point.
Couldn't agree more. It's a self-deceit. If you say it, and if you believe in it, you are deceiving yourself. No one was successful, to my perspective, obviously. No one was successful just because they worked 24 hours a day. And no one failed because they worked only 14 hours. Okay, so I'm not saying work 2 hours a day and go to the beach. No entrepreneur can do it, even if they wanted to. But you can keep a balance. You can be with your family. You can be there in the meaningful moments. You can spend time with the kids. You can spend time with the wife. It wouldn't hurt the business. It will just do good.
Sure. Right. 100%. Not only that, like, if you think about it, if you just take a trip to the closest cemetery, and after 100, hopefully all of us will live to 180 plus, but you go to any gravestone, it doesn't say, here lies the person that worked 14 hours a week and made $1.6 billion. I mean, I haven't seen a gravestone like that yet. But it's like, here lies the person that was dedicated to his family. Here lies the person that was there for the community. Here lies a person that was a kind and giving person, things like that. These are the things we remember. We're not taking our money with us or our work hours to wherever we go, to heaven, to whoever it is. We're not taking that with us. But we're taking with us, our memory is like, for example, like you mentioned, was he a dedicated family man? Has he given back to his community? The impact that he made. And this is something that we constantly have to remember. We get so consumed with work and trying to be busy and trying to this and that, we forget the most important things in life. Work, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. Work is supposed to serve us, not us serving work. Work is something that we do. It's not who we are, right? Work gives us the ability to have monetary freedom. It gives us the ability to pay our rent, to put food on the table, to give charity in a monetary way. It gives us the ability to have some type of thing. But it's not who we are. End of the day, Ephraim, Zohar, it could be Zohar's a family man, someone that gives back to his community, that helps people, and that's what we have. We can't get consumed and lose our identity in the work.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more. Maybe I would just add one sentence. I'd say something like that.
Sure.
Personally, I'm defined by my family and friends and the impact I'm making and everything you said, for sure. I will say that I don't see Pecan just as a workplace. For me, my work is part, an integral and very meaningful and very deep part of my life.
Sure.
Definitely. But that's, for me, not an excuse to let it override other elements, which in principle, like you said, are by far and by a very large margin more important than anything else in life, which is the family, of course. So that's how I see it.
Right. Incredible. And that's, and like you said, it's what works for you, and that's amazing. You have to figure out, I think every entrepreneur, every person in general has to figure out their right balance and navigate what works for them. Yeah, it's a certain, like, as we're talking about, personal things and talking about, like, moving the whole topic, in life, all our narratives, quote unquote, are the same, right? So let's say, for example, there's only 100 problems in the world that a person could go through. Every single person has to go through those 100 problems, but in their own narrative, right? So therefore, we're able to see, you're going to have to experience it in your own way, but you're able to get support from someone else and listening to their way, how they went through it, not necessarily identifying with it, right? And not comparing, but being able to identify and receive strength from there. So same thing over here. This is what works for you, but so an entrepreneur listening, even myself, I'm able to get to, not to compare, but to identify and take inspiration from that. So I can listen to that and to apply it to my framework of life too. That's so important. So important. So let's say a hard day comes about. You're working at Pecan and God forbid some deal fell through, or, your code is breaking or something like that. And all of a sudden you're all stressful and you're like, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart, God forbid. What's your component, your way of dealing with stress and setbacks?
I have found the truth. I have found the answer. And I do recommend it to all of my colleagues and friends out there. So those of you who know me already heard my Torah. It's I do two things. So the first thing I do is physical exercise. I am trying to weave into the daily routine some form of walking, running, biking, whatever, it doesn't matter. I even take meetings while, for example, walking. I have days of time where I can walk for 20 miles, even more, and just be on the phone in meetings in Zoom. Yeah. It works out for me. It works out amazing. It helps me, keep myself focused. It helps put things into perspective. Nothing will ever happen because of a single deal or of a single code malfunction. You shouldn't take these things too hard. as the same as you shouldn't be too happy from a single success. Building a company from my school, building a company like I was trained by, for example, Chaim, is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a long, hard, intense effort. You have mountains and you have valleys, and you have to kind of you have to reduce your emotional spectrum, not to be too excited about, local good things or too upset about local bad things. So combining the two, having this perspective and weaving in a lot of physical exercise really helps me personally.
Right. And I think, remember from our last conversation, you mentioned something really phenomenal. And you said, if I recall correctly, when the way you deal with stress, I think it's such a brilliant thing and people could take it from it. There's conceptual and there's actual, if you recall correctly. And, which is essentially what you mentioned right now. When you're actually able to do actual stuff, which is the physical exercise, and conceptual, knowing that nothing is as bad as it seems, and nothing is as good as it seems. And it always, falls out in the middle ground. Over there.
Absolutely.
That's there.
It's exactly the case. For me, it was always the case. You will never maneuver away from bad news. You get news all the time. Right. As a CEO, you get news all the time. Some of the news are good, some of the news are bad. But if you can put things into perspective, and if you can tone down your emotional regulation, so to speak, then for me it was an incredibly important mental shift I made that helped me kind of, continue with the effort.
Right. Wow. What inspires you to show up every single day and put your best effort?
It's a very easy answer. It's the people. It's the people that are working at Pecan, the people that I cannot disappoint and they cannot disappoint me. The relationships that we are building, the vision that we are trying to materialize. If you choose the people wisely and correctly, and again, you will always make mistakes here as well, but if you do that, if you invest enough effort into that, you will have a very good reason to not disappoint them every day.
Wow. I can imagine. I mean, if you weren't doing Pecan, besides obviously your academic career, I'm sure you're probably sitting on a porch somewhere overlooking the water, discussing the deeper meanings and philosophy of life, of how to live the most meaningful life possible. Yeah. But what message do we tell a young Zohar that, even before he enters university, knowing that he's going to stay there for 10 years, but what do we tell him? You have the whole entire world in front of you, everything. You could, go to South America and stay in South America. You could become a surf bum over there, which is absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's great. Or you could go ahead and launch a company, or you could go into the academic career, or you could just end up being a barista maybe in Starbucks somewhere. What message do we tell him?
It's a great question. Listen, it's not the boilerplate answer kind of a question. I would say that for me, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter what you're doing, as long as you are satisfied with how much you tried being the best. The only thing I find hard personally is like being okay with mediocre, or being okay with just letting it slide, or just going doing it in a good enough way. For me, do whatever makes you tick. And there are many paths not taken that could have made me tick as well. Whatever makes you tick is fine. Like you said, even if you just want to surf, that's fine. Just try and be the best you can at it, because an unfulfilled potential for me personally is a painful thing. That's it.
Wow. I have no words. No words.
That's a first time, I find.
Just show up. Show up 100%. Become the absolute master. Just be whatever you want to be, like you say. Be whatever you want to be. If you want to work in Starbucks, go work in Starbucks. If you want to work in, in a restaurant and be a waiter, do that. If you want to become a scientist, become a scientist. If you want to become an entrepreneur, be an entrepreneur. But whatever it is you're going to be, become the best at it.
Best version of
yourself. Right. Best version of yourself at it. Become a master of your domain. Incredible. Incredible. Zohar, I have no words. No words. This has been absolutely inspiring, very meaningful, very emotional. I feel it within me, and I have learned a tremendous amount. There's no doubt in my mind that so many people are going to benefit from this. I mean, there's so many lessons, so many incredible things. Everything, and we touched upon, we just touched upon the surface level of what we could go deeper into. Everything from entrepreneurship to mistakes not to make. What it means to have, a spouse and that type of conversation you need to have. What it means to have that, dedicating to your family life. Happiness, how to deal with stress. We spoke about so many things. We spoke about almost the first circle, the gagal, the full circle of life. And there's so many more topics to talk about, which I'm sure we're going to for another time. But I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for this most incredible conversation.
I really enjoyed chatting with you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.